Okay, we're all in, sure.
Great, Gail, whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm sorry to be a little late. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gail Brewer, Manhattan Borough President, and I again want to thank you for our 3 o'clock on Tuesdays. There's so much going on. We have a new governor, so I'm very excited about Kathy Hochul. I know, I also though have to say I went to a funeral this morning of a friend whose son was 28. I've known him since he was small, and I assume everyone says, nobody discusses it, that he was not vaccinated and he died. So we were all at the funeral this morning. It could not be worse. It could not be worse. So you know better in terms of the COVID issues, and then we'll talk more about some of the budget issues. In terms of COVID, I think you know that the FDA has approved the first vaccine, the Pfizer, and I guess it's going to be marketed. I didn't know under this Comirnaty. You probably know this better than I do. And then it'll be for 16 and above, but the 12 to 15-year-olds can still get vaccinated. And I guess there'll be a third dose in certain immune compromised individuals available. But I have to say, and I don't know if I'm in trouble for this or not, but the pharmacies I know, you know me, I don't go to the big pharmacies. I only go to the mom and pop pharmacies. And they are all giving boosters of, in many cases, not Pfizer, because it has a much more challenging refrigeration, but they are giving third doses of others. So I don't know if that's legal or not, but just so you know, that's happening. So if you go to your local pharmacy, you can probably get a third dose. We know that the school staff is required to be vaccinated. And I know that this, I believe, going to be a lawsuit on that. That's according to the papers today. We all have concerns about the Delta variant. And I think it's more people are getting vaccinated. So that's a positive. I think because of the $100 and the Delta variant. I know friends of mine who are doctors and they're doing so much work as independent doctors, giving vaccinations at family days at night, but people are not getting the $100. So it makes it hard on them because they are they're at NYCHA, people need to get vaccinated, but if there's no $100, people will wait. And then of course, maybe they won't get vaccinated. So there's a lot of drama in terms of the vaccination still. And I know today, thank you to all these wonderful participants, we're gonna have a discussion now. This is more on the issue of other topics, but one of them is food access and plans for mental health and then back to school. So those are the three topics. The first speaker is very, very special to us. Kate Mckenzie, she's director of the Mayor's Office of Food Policy. I think most of you know her. She took over the office after 2 decades in the sector. She was at Food Change, she was at City Harvest. She's a food hero. I think she's actually been declared as such, but she's just a food hero to those of us who know her. And she has been doing everything she can. I think she took over from Catherine Garcia when Catherine left to run for mayor, and she's been doing a phenomenal job ever since. I just want to say that I've seen her in action and nobody could be better qualified for this job. I know she has a hard leaving the meeting by 3:30. So without further ado, Kate Mckenzie, the floor is yours, and thank you for joining us. And I think you should talk about anything you want, but I think people do want to know about what's going on with Homebound, what's going on with Grab and Go, and then just generally what's going on with some of the food issues that are so much on everyone's mind. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for your, you are the food hero. You are the food hero for so many reasons. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk with your constituents and appreciate your incredible hardworking team for inviting me to today's briefing. Food is a fundamental human right, hard stop. I am extremely proud of the city's extraordinary and unprecedented work to ensure that no New Yorker went hungry as a result of the pandemic. I'm going to start by just presenting a brief overview of the current state of hunger across the city and walk through an overview of the city's COVID-19 emergency food response during the pandemic, and then outline the city's pathway forward as we transition from emergency to recovery. Simply put, food insecurity exists when someone does not know where their next meal is going to come from. It's the feeling of uncertainty that results in coping mechanisms, like a parent choosing to skip their own meal to ensure that their child has enough to eat, or buying what's cheapest, which often isn't the healthiest. And it can even mean turning to a food pantry or a soup kitchen. Pre-pandemic, over 1 million New Yorkers faced food insecurity. When the crisis first hit New York City, the stay-at-home rules that we all remember and the massive increases in unemployment, compounded by the backlog in unemployment benefit applications at the state level, created a dramatic increase in food insecurity, so that we had about 1.6 million New Yorkers who are experiencing that. And right now we're down to a still alarmingly high but lower rate of about 1.4 million New Yorkers. And even before the pandemic, New York City maintained and continues to maintain a portfolio of programs to provide meals and food resources to New Yorkers, including a universally free breakfast and lunch opportunity in all school food authorities operated by the Department of Education across the city, the Department for the Aging's group meals at more than 300 senior centers, and the home delivered meal program, as well as the Human Resource Administration's Emergency Food Assistance Program that brings food to pantries. When the pandemic first hit in March of 2020, the city shifted to planning for a COVID-19 food response through a massive interagency effort. These programs are collectively known as Get Food and included the Grab and Go Meal Program, the Emergency Food Home Delivered Meal Program, or EFD, and increased support for pantries and other emergency food distribution efforts. Let's talk just briefly about the Grab and Go program. When the city schools shut down in March of 2020 last year, DOE quickly pivoted to offering grab and go meals at school sites all across the city, serving any New Yorker, no questions asked. And as students began returning to school, those operations for grab and go transitioned to accommodate those changing realities on the ground, including continuous school closures that resulted from the COVID positive cases of either staff or students, that required the Department of Education to nimbly open new sites and redeploy staff to existing ones as necessary. Thankfully, with the return to full in-person learning next month, we are also excited to be returning to serving that universal breakfast and lunch at all DOE School Food Authority schools. While this means that the community model will be concluding with the end of the summer meals program on September 10th, the city has dedicated unprecedented resources into our emergency food provider network, namely food pantries, so that New Yorkers can continue to access really good free food options with no questions asked all across the city. Now, about emergency food home delivery. As you'll recall, with the onset of the pause order, the mayor made it clear that no New Yorker should experience hunger as a result of the pandemic. For New Yorkers who could not go out, had no one to go out for them, and could not afford private delivery options, the city stood up this EFD program that New Yorkers in need could enroll in, either by calling 311, going online, or using an authorized enroller, which allowed community-based organizations to order meals on behalf of clients whom they had already had those trusted relationships with, as well as manage recurring orders and update individual account information as needed. The city also grandfathered in known DFTA clients who were participating in senior center congregate meals at the time of their closure last March. Fortunately, as the city has continued to recover and reopen, participation in the program has continued to decline on a parallel track. That data, if you want to check it out on participation, is available at nyc.gov/getfood month over month. New York City also has a network of more than 1,000 food pantries and emergency food providers that range from some of the nation's largest food banks to some of the smaller neighborhood churches and community organizations. This network of emergency food providers not only faced extraordinary increases in demand, but also had to quickly implement new operating standards, including social distancing, utilizing PPE, and transitioning to pre-boxed offerings. Additionally, many of these pantries relied on volunteers who themselves were and are COVID vulnerable. In April of 2020, Mayor de Blasio and Speaker Johnson announced a $25 million COVID emergency fund to support this network with COVID-related expenses, including food and supplies. All told, more than 500 pantries received this food and funding support through this coordinated effort. As a precautionary measure, the mayor also called for the creation of a food reserve in the event of any supply chain disruptions, extreme increases in demand, or any other unforeseen emergency event. Fortunately, those supply chain disruptions never materialized, so last August, we transitioned that food reserve into a new program, the Pandemic Food Reserve Emergency Distribution Program, commonly known as PFRED. For the first time through this program, the city began offering fresh, high-quality produce to providers across the city, allowing recipient organizations to select the produce that they want when they want it, and serving organizations who are both long-standing food pantries, as well as new operations that stood up in response to the pandemic. Since the start of 2021, the PFRED program has distributed nearly 17 million pounds of fresh, high-quality food. If there are groups in your district that are interested in joining the program, please encourage them to email foodreserve@hra.nyc.gov. The city also invested nearly $1 million in equipment grants to build capacity in our city's pantries, and these efforts have helped to ensure that we have a more resilient emergency food network going forward. Just transitioning now from thinking about the recovery efforts here. As the city has continued to recover and reopen, we have been focused on transitioning from emergency to recovery programming. While the Get Food programs have had an extraordinary impact, they are designed to be temporary emergency relief programs and were authorized as an emergency rule. At the same time, we know the dramatic rise in food insecurity will not go away anytime soon and are committed to continuing to meet this need. While the COVID emergency food home delivered meal program will be concluding in October, we are already in the process of contacting all New Yorkers who participate in the program to identify those who will still be in need of food assistance from the city beyond October. Those individuals will then be connected to longer-term programs and agency homes. These will include DFDA's group meal programs, case-managed home-delivered meals program, and a new food recovery program for homebound older New Yorkers. Additionally, the city is in contract negotiations on a tech-based new food pilot program that will provide grocery credits to redeem online at local grocers. And of course, all of the increased ongoing support and resources to emergency food across the city. An additional $27 million was allocated to PFRED in this current new fiscal year, and we are continuing to constantly improve and refine PFRED, including increasing the variety of produce offered and ensuring that even more culturally appropriate foods are available. For example, most recently, we distributed plantains, mangoes, and bok choy, in addition to many other fruits and vegetables. There's also a $3.6 million increase to the baseline funding for the city's Emergency Food Assistance Program, otherwise known as EFAP, that brings that program's annual budget to close to $24 million. On that note, I want to leave some time to answer any questions that you have, and really thank you, Borough President, and your team for your continued partnership and deep commitment to the city.
Thank you very much, Kate Mckenzie. Certainly Schuler Warren Pooter is the one that has done all the work, but I appreciate what you've been doing. I have one question, but then you guys who are on the call, you need to either just talk or make your voice known by raising your hand in the chat. Either way, you're welcome to join in. But one question I have is for the homebound, and then also a little bit on the non-homebound. So the homebound, I don't know if there's 28,000 folks who were enrolled who are older, homebound. Do they go to Meals on Wheels? Do they, what happened? I mean, I understand you
Sure.
said something's gonna happen to them, but I'm not quite clear. So
Sure.
go ahead.
Thank you. It's such an important question. And of the roughly 27,000 New Yorkers right now who continue to receive Get Food, about 18,000 of them are seniors.
Right.
Each of those individuals, we started Monday last week doing whether it was by robocalls, emails, texts, and soon to be in-person phone calls, making every effort possible to contact those individuals to determine what their needs are. If they are homebound, whether or not then they will receive and are eligible for the home delivered meal program or that other program that DFTA will be standing up to support their food needs. And again, the other option will be the pilot program that we're creating, which is more tech-based, but we have at least 3 different tools at our disposal to begin to transition individuals onto.
Okay, and then those who, maybe this is the same list, who went to the schools and who now, if they are not homebound, I assume they can go to the pantry. That's the concept behind it.
Correct.
But
correct.
Pantries have long lines. Get Food didn't have such a long line. And you have to bring your baskets. It's like a different thing. It's not, it's a different world.
Yeah.
So how will that work?
No question about it. It is a different service. And that's one of the reasons why today is Tuesday. Yesterday, the Department of Education started notifying individuals so that they can plan accordingly. We definitely didn't want to surprise anyone. These are changes to longstanding programs, and we really want to make sure that everyone is supported with the transition.
Okay, I mean, others have questions. I could go on because okay. So what role will Meals on Wheels play? Will it be one of the folks that could continue if a person is homebound? How do they play a role?
I think, City Meals on Wheels is such an important resource to the city, and I really encourage, as I know you have a longstanding and anyone, relationship with the Department for the Aging, that question is really suited for their consideration.
Okay, all right, I sort of understand that. Shula, do you have other questions? Why don't you go ahead, and others should jump in.
Sure, and Kate, thanks so much for being here, and also knowing that you are not DOE, but could you talk a little bit more about the type of outreach that the DOE is doing at the grab and go sites, whether it's signage or PBT or SNAP information to let people know, families and also adult participants, that the program is ending and what other programs they might be able to take advantage of?
Sure.
And also just to jump in there, because I don't know, kosher food pantry, I don't know if that works, or halal, I have no idea. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And then the other thing is people have gone to some of the grab and go, and as you may know, some of the information was not given out correctly. So you got to get that straight. Go ahead, Kate.
Yes, thank you. So a few things. Number one, I want to start, and I really appreciate the call out for PEBT. This is such an extraordinary resource. My office in the coming weeks will have, and I know you have produced a flyer, which is extraordinarily helpful, and will follow up with even additional information. Every parent of a child in a New York City School Food Authority has received about between $800 and $1,000 of additional money on their pandemic EBT benefit card. I used mine yesterday. Actually, I have 2 kids and it was loaded, and just make sure there's also, it's coming in 2 chunks. This is a lot of information, but the top line message is that parents should know that those cards are going to have more money on them. So please make sure that word gets out. If parents, I did it, you can call the back of the card, a number on the card to check your balance. And then again, we'll make sure that information gets out for additional questions there. You had a question about the Department of Education. Obviously, they are transitioning in many ways to in-person learning and changing operations from community sites and different forms of summer meal food service program. I really encourage you to please check the DOE website for program updates for specific sites. It is not quite a universal, all things happen on the same day, because some are open, some sites are open to the public, some are serving, a specific school population. So the DOE website is going to be, it is updated daily. And we will check to make sure that, and help hold them accountable to that. Shula, there's also a piece of collateral I saw earlier in the week that is beginning to be distributed at schools, again, with every intention to give adults the heads up about the shift that will occur. The last day for that meal is going to be September 10th at those community sites. Borough President, you asked some great questions, particularly about kosher and halal and what's available at food pantries. We have extraordinary resources in the city, namely through organizations like Met Council and many other programs that specifically distribute culturally appropriate foods. PFRED is also supplying kosher and halal certified proteins to organizations that need that. So again, I see, we'll get that into the chat. It is Food Reserve at hra.nyc.gov to access those foods.
Okay. And then how is good news about the regional farms? And I guess that's where you're getting some of your fabulous fresh fruits and vegetables. Is that,
It is.
how is that working? And are they actually getting more business and funding? And are we going to be able to keep our local farmers? Or I just want to know generally how the program is going.
Yeah, we made within the contract with the vendor, we really wanted to underscore that when possible, we're utilizing those regional forms of produce. And I do know that that is happening. Now, obviously, the plantains are not coming from New York, but to the degree that we have product.
She'll come back. She just froze. So what happens in the world of Zoom? Maybe I don't know, Shula, if something else you want to mention about the regional farms while we're doing this, or if anybody else knows more about it than I do.
One thing interesting I can add just while Kate's coming back on is that one of the things that we had thanked Kate for earlier is that when AFI approached our office, noticing that there was a need for more food distributions in Chinatown that particularly connected people with culturally appropriate foods. One of the things that Emily Rios, their manager, mentioned to me is that AFI was using some of the funding that they had to purchase special produce from New York State farmers who were growing bok choy, who were growing all different types of greens and vegetables that are particularly used within traditional Chinese cooking. So it was really interesting. Apparently there are all these farmers in New York State that specialize in that produce, and we're already getting it to Chinatown. So it's kind of an interesting thing as well.
Great, Kate, you froze, but now you're back. So
I got back.
The regional farming, we're just talking about the regional farming, how that goes.
Yeah, so, we, I think before I got booted off, we are convening a regional food working group to figure out even more ways that we can unlock different opportunities to connect farmers and growers and processors and all things to benefit the city's food contracts and ultimately the people of New York.
Okay, because of course, what I've always wanted, and we have a bill to this on this topic, which is that the city agencies purchase from the farms, and it has not happened. It's been talked, but DCAS, I love DCAS, but they haven't really done it, and they haven't done it in the jails. They haven't done it at the hospitals. Well, that's not them, but there are 3 agencies, and of course DOE tries, but it's not particularly successful. So anything we can do, maybe other agencies could help be part of that task force. We would love to be part of it also, and try to make sure that the ways in which the food is grown and, you know, the way the specs are written can bring the farmers closer to the city. And of course, the other issue is when you do that, then you're going to get opportunities for farmers who are way north of what I call NYC Grow Green Market. So there's so many aspects to it. I don't mean to be difficult. I've only been trying.
You're not at all. I love it.
20 years I've been trying. So if there was some way of making that happen, that would be fantastic. 20 years is a long time. So that would be great. I mean, congratulations. I think I just one other question, just because you have a few more minutes, would be what I don't really understand the grocery program, the grocery credits. Can you explain that?
In a few weeks, I look forward to doing that. We are in contract negotiations, so I'm not at liberty to discuss that right now.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that we're looking forward to being able to support local grocers in ways that that we've not been able to over the last 18 months. And that will, you know, again, sort of lean into, you know, enabling people to purchase the groceries that they want and that they need for either store pickup or delivery.
That's great. The other thing is on EBT, when I was at the Green Market, I understood either from the manager or maybe I talked to Marcel, I can't remember, that the EBT, the PEBT is being spent at the Green Market. But you know what, they haven't done a big deal of it. And I think it would be helpful because I know it's $1.5 billion. I have the number memorized for the city, but we don't have any constant, I get every other friggin' information from the city. You know, Mrs. Jones is missing. I don't know Mrs. Jones. I don't care about Mrs. Jones, but I would like to know how much the EBT is being spent on fresh foods or on local, I don't know, some kind of data that would be helpful. I don't know if it's possible. It's certainly possible from Green Market.
What I can tell you right now, which, and perhaps I'll have to, you know, it's a, as you know, state utilization, so I can connect with the state. But what I do know from the first round of expenditures, the redemption rate has been extraordinary. So at the top level, at least we know people are using this benefit, because there was a great deal of frustration and concern, as you probably recall, that this is really clunky and how will people who've never used a benefit know how to use it. I think it was north of 85% of benefits have been utilized, which is great. But I appreciate the question and will connect with my state counterparts to be able to see what we can dig into.
Right. I think it would be helpful for the public to know it's their money.
Yeah.
And they would like to know something good, because that is actually something good. We don't have a lot of good news.
Yeah.
All right. I want to thank Kate Mckenzie very much, and I appreciate it. And we look forward to talking to you in the future. I have to say there will be, I think, some hiccups in terms of people who have been either homebound or getting grab and go. And so we look forward to working with you.
Same. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you. Our next speaker is the very special LaShawn Robinson, who's Deputy Chancellor, is the craziest name, of School Climate and Wellness at the Department of Education. Luckily, she's a social worker, so that is even better. And she leads the DOE's efforts to provide support services, safety, social and emotional wellness, mental health, medical care, community school initiatives and guidance. And she has met with us in the past. She obviously worked with all students, but certainly those who are temporarily unhoused or live in transitional housing always need these services. I know these students well. And I think just last night, Errol Lewis, who's always on top of everything, I get Spectrum because I won't go near files. As long as Errol Lewis is on New York 1, I am never going to switch. I won't even, I know I could watch him on my, no, I'm sticking with Errol Lewis. So he asked the mayor about this last night, and I get along with the mayor, but he doesn't have any data. I'm like, where is your data? So he didn't answer the data. So the bad news, LaShawn Robinson, we'd like some data, which the mayor did not provide, about how it's going with your, thank goodness that you advocated for more social workers and how many are in the schools and so on and so forth, whatever you want to share. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much to the Honorable Borough President, Gail Brewer, for having me here this afternoon.
Thank you.
I'm going to get off my talking points for 1 second to just start with the data. We're excited because we are 80% staffed on our commitment for
Great,
500.
Yeah.
So we're super excited about that. We have really stayed focused on hiring in this area. People told us that it couldn't be done. I'm always up for a good challenge, especially when it comes to our young people and providing them with the support that they need and deserve. So we are making great ground there. I mean, it's unimaginable that so many social workers, thank you, my profession showed up big time, really, signed up, found out what it was going to take to become a social worker in this moment. And they've been hired and they're on board. That's 80% system-wide for the 500 and 81% in Manhattan. I got you your data too, Borough President.
That's
I wanted
fabulous.
to make sure that I didn't show up empty-handed on a data front today. Also, I'd just like to thank you and acknowledge that when we met previously, you talked about, partnerships with universities, with schools of social work. And I met with every single school of social work. So we've been able to strengthen partnership, and we're looking forward to additional gains in that area in terms of having more student interns in our school system, professional learning, and just really thinking about other areas for partnership. And I also know that they've been critical in ensuring that we've been able to meet the challenge of this moment in terms of staffing our schools to ensure that in every school, we either have a social worker or a mental health clinic there to meet the needs in real time that our young people, families, and educators may have. So we're excited about that. Now I'm going to go back on script, but I just wanted to start there and share that because I'm so proud of the collective of this team. I'm joined today by my colleague, Flavia Puello, who's just going to share a little deck. As you know, our Chancellor, Misha Porter, she sends her greetings. She's been everywhere talking about recovery for this school year and talking about homecoming. And we know that the pandemic has made clearer than ever why supportive school environments, social emotional learning, the school-based mental health structures, they're so important right now. We know our students, our families, and educators have experienced significant trauma over the past year, the abrupt separation from school, loss of loved ones, the illness of themselves or loved ones, fear and anxiety about health and safety, and more. My own son, he graduated in June, and he described his senior year as anticlimactic and really wasn't excited about participating in graduation exercises. So we really had to encourage him and push. But even like that kind of loss for a young person can be something that we really need to pay attention to. So certainly I have. But at the same time, I know that we've seen tremendous resilience within our school communities. My son, he got over the hump. He started college a few weeks ago. So we're really excited in my family for that. So we're just amazed at all of the ways our communities come together to support one another and persist despite tremendous obstacles. So I'm grateful to be here today to be able to talk more about this important work that lives within the Division of School Climate and Wellness, the Department of Education. And we really look at the work from the lens of improving academic outcomes by helping schools address social emotional well-being and support healthy social, emotional, and behavioral development. And this moment in particular, I think we can flip that and say that we want to focus on emotional well-being as a way to improve academic outcomes, especially in this moment. And we go about doing that in different ways, building the capacity of educators, making connections, connecting school students and families with supports and resources, and then of course creating positive school environments. So this work is very important to us, near and dear to my heart as a social worker. I'm the first social worker to sit on a chancellor's cabinet. So really being able to have my voice there, especially in this moment, has just been essential, and I'm glad to be here amongst such great champions. Next slide, please, Flavia. So we are returning to school. We're gearing up for homecoming this September after one of the most challenging times in history. It's the COVID pandemic, the recent attention on longstanding racial injustice, all that's been going on. It's had a significant impact on the social emotional wellness of students, staff, and families. Even the prior presentation, if you think about food insecurity or housing insecurity, in an Active Mind study, 80% of students reported experiencing negative mental health symptoms as a result of the pandemic, with 20% saying their mental health worsened significantly. There's another study, the Mckenzie study, where 1,000 employees were surveyed and 90% reported an impact on their behavioral health, with 4 times the rate of anxiety and depression. We know that families are concerned too. We saw this in our own New York City survey data, and it's certainly validated here, with 22% of families reporting a worsening of their child's social emotional wellness. So we have, the data presented here and more information about how our young people in our school communities have been impacted. We know that if we focus first and foremost on the adults, the educators, and their well-being, then we'll be able to collectively focus in on our students. So it's our educators and our families, and then collectively we can partner to focus on our students. And we know the importance of relationships in this moment. Next slide, please, Flavia. Relationships matter more than ever. And we've been out engaging with communities. We held town halls with thousands and thousands of parents and stakeholders. We've also conducted empathy interviews so that we can hear directly from communities. We know that there are many feelings and emotions connected with school reopening. We have also seen that there's clear indication that schools are healthy places to support students' social emotional development, and that students and adults want to be back in communities together. I remember all of the openings that we had last year, and the first day of every opening, there was always like a young person who would just dart off the school bus or run up to the teacher or principal, and just that first embrace, that first hug, that first connection, that to me, made all of the craziness worth it, and really just reconnecting young people to safe and supportive environments outside of the home environment was just priceless. So we know that, we will continue to deal with lingering anxiety, but the overwhelming sentiment connected to return to school is joy and anticipation. And we're excited about that too. So we've designed supports to be able to meet the needs of this moment. Next slide.
LaShawn, if I may just add something quickly here, as you're emphasizing on relationships. Good afternoon, everyone. Flavia Puella from LaShawn's team, and I'm delighted to be here with you, both from the the DOE lens, but also from the lens of a parent whose child actually goes to school in a Manhattan school. But what I will add is that the same way that the statistics and the studies that LaShawn depicted, just from the surveys that we have collected from students and families, we know that for many of our community, schools are safe havens, right? They're places where families and students come to be connected, where there's maps and supports to community-based organizations, where the world and the lives of students really revolves around that. Like I put in my cap, even as a former DOE principal, and understanding how, like, under regular circumstances, sometimes it was challenging to just get students to leave at the end of the day, because they saw the school as their second family, and in some cases as like the place where they were getting the support, especially our students who were like impacted by homelessness, by insecurity, or who had like less instability at home. So I think is really important to put that within the context of relationships that LaShawn is emphasizing here, and that our schools are so much more than just places where students come to learn math and ELA, but they're places really where the whole being of a child. I know that for me as a parent, it was challenging the times that my son was fully remotely, and just also like, you know, when we were afforded that opportunity, and I also see how excited he's looking forward to going back to school. Thanks, LaShawn.
Thank you for that, Flavia. If you go to the next slide, I think we had an
Over
opportunity,
that one, yep.
yeah, to talk about the social worker hiring. So in the interest of time, we'll move on to the implementing the cell screeners, which is an important part of the work that we're going to be engaged in. And as part of this year's focus on emotional and mental health needs, the DOE will be implementing a social and emotional strengths-based assessment for all students. The strengths assessment is designed to ensure that our young people have access to the right services and to provide foundational preventative supports to classroom teachers. So the CEL assessment it will broadly assess students' social and emotional competencies. It's not a clinical instrument specific to assessing like depression or other mental health challenges. Is really anchored in social emotional learning and there to provide the classroom teacher and the school community with the next step for a young person or a group of young people. So when done well, you will find teachers making adjustments to social emotional curricula within classroom communities. You will also find young people getting supports and resources that they need to be successful from a mental health and wellness lens. So that may mean, you know, meeting with the school-based social worker or participating in a supportive peer group. So really thinking about how do we support the foundational needs of young people from a proactive stance, and then when a young person needs more, to be able to get them the supports that they need in real time. So we are pretty excited about having this tool available within our toolkit. We're also excited that it's a strengths-based model and not a deficit-based model, which really aligns well with the principles of, you know, what social workers seek to do in our day-to-day practice, but also within the realm of culturally responsive and sustaining education. So that's really important for us. The next resource that we have available this school year is within our Bridge to School plan. So we provided curricular resources last year as we started the 2020-21 school year. And this year, we're building upon those resources and we're releasing the Bridge to School 2.0, sharing even more resources that will be available to schools. There are age-appropriate activities to strengthen community and foster resilience. The activities are also designed to support adult wellness. So there will be activities that principals can facilitate with educators and school staff members. We have recommendations from many stakeholders that we've included within the Bridge to School 2.0. So we're really excited about that. And finally, we've done extensive work engaging with parents and families. And Flavia will talk about that. She's been closely connected to that work. So Flavia, if you can share.
Yeah, thank you, LaShawn. And I mean, I think I'll start by saying that throughout the summer, I think this was one of the most like exciting and humbling projects that we were able to be a part and help to lead. And it was done in collaboration with our community empowerment division as well. And we were gratefully also funded by philanthropy. So the Tiger Foundation and a few other foundations supported our efforts. And we were able to target a partnership with the Healing Center group and our parent leaders to train families to become, you know, trauma-informed, supported at their schools, right? So the idea was that each of the schools that were selected were able to designate a parent member that will be empowered to really help to lead this work and lead these efforts. And, you know, the majority of their schools also trained their parent coordinator to be a part of this. So we did for them the same kind of training and supports that we did for our principals in partnership with Dr. Jean Wright, with the University of Chicago. We were able to pay a stipend for the parents that participated, $500. So really like honoring the commitment and the times that the parents had to put in to do this, because a lot of the sessions were about 3.5 hours, and we have multiple sessions throughout the summer. But I think the piece that I say that was like exciting and was like energizing about this effort was really seeing like the high level of engagement that we saw for families, how they came there with ideas, and the fact that this whole endeavor was really like with parents, for parents. Like we had parent leaders who were also like helping to co-facilitate some of the sessions, and really like very well integrated, so that they felt like they were both like receiving content and receiving support, but also that they saw parents at the forefront of leading these efforts. So
Flavia, we gotta start to wrap up. I don't mean to be rude, but there are some questions. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And just to close, just emphasizing, we were able to get about 154 schools from Manhattan that participated and joined the collective. And overall, we got roughly around 800 parents who participated, around 900 parents who participated, and in total, about 1,200 parents and parent coordinators when we look at the collective. But I think the idea here is that we know that this idea of homecoming has to extend beyond just the support and the work that we do with school leaders and that we do with teachers. And like, we really have to bring parents at the forefront of collaborating and moving this agenda forward if we want to have a successful reopening of schools. So thank you so much.
I just want to add for you and LaShawn just something small, and I'm actually putting in writing. You know me, I'm always writing letters. But this, I know NYCHA really well. And so for years, I've been trying to get the principal who is near, like I know PS 185 is right near King Towers. So you got PS 185, wonderful principal, has no idea who the TA president is at King Towers, which is like a city unto itself, and who the manager is of King Towers. So I'm just saying that we need all the principal lists. This is what I'm doing in Manhattan, all the management, NYCHA, and all of the TA presidents. And again, it doesn't solve all problems, but if a parent is having an issue, I can promise you that TA leader knows. So it's just another example of how you have to go beyond. This is only where there's a school that is near or has children from the NYCHA development. So I just want that to try to, I think as a social worker, you'll understand how important that is.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Something to think about. All right, keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt, but.
No, I think we're wrapping up. The last piece was just on, the family component and how families are at the forefront of the work. I've joined these sessions with over 1,200 parents and parent coordinators really getting on board, all focused on mental health and wellness and preparing for reopening in September. So we are happy to take questions.
Okay, go ahead. Let's see who we got. Chris, go ahead. If you want it. LeBron, Community Board 4, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Borough President. I'm really, really excited to talk about social work in public schools. I went to 51111 Wagner Environmental Studies. My mother was a guidance counselor 20 years ago, and she was forced to do trauma guidance during the time after 9/11. Going to piggyback on what the Borough President said, in my Community Board 4, we have the Old Graphic Arts, we have Bayard Rustin High School. Just to the north of that is Martin Luther King High School. We have JKO just to the east of us. And then we also have the Old Park West High School. Most of these students commute. When we're talking about trauma social work opportunities, these schools have been broken down sometimes to 4, 5, or 6 academies. What's going to be done to ensure that those academies have access and those students have continued access outside of my community board, because I want these kids to have a consistent touch base. And as the Borough President said, it's critical to have an understanding of where the demography of those students are in Manhattan and outside of Manhattan.
Thank you for that question, Chris, is so important. One of the core components is connection and being able to connect students, families, and educators to resources. We didn't get to speak here about community schools, but we're also increasing the number of community schools. And one resource that we have from community schools that we're sharing across the city is a zip code lookup, where you can look up any zip code, whether it's a young person trying to access resources in close proximity to their school community, or if they're trying to access resources, where they live, because a Brooklyn resident, and I know many of the young people in my community, they attend school in Manhattan. So really having that resource available so that superintendents, principals, social workers, educators are aware of the resource and can connect families and students to a local mental health resource that meets their needs, whether it's they need something close to home or something close to school, that will be available.
The next question is Coral Dawson. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I don't know to what degree your supports allow for you to also have programming that is motion or movement related. And I say that because it's just so difficult in the past year for the children to have just literally the physical, any physical recreation, any fun. And that is just seeing the difference when, over the summer when the kids can run around and actually play. It's been such a mood enhancer just broadly that I feel like finding a way, especially under these constraints, is just incredibly important, whichever way is possible for all children. And I don't know if that's outside of what you're doing in terms of supports, but I feel like it actually is incredibly critical.
Absolutely, Coral. We certainly see physical health as being an important component of mental health, and movement is a part of it. I also have an opportunity to oversee the Office of School Wellness Programs, and that includes many of the city's initiatives that support physical education, health education, also our Move to Improve initiatives, which are like movement breaks in classrooms, if you think about it like that, because we recognize movement to be essential to the teaching and learning process as well. We're doing everything possible to keep our athletics league going fully operational this year, and keep our young people, on the field, on the course, and enjoying this a sport that they love. We see that connected to mental health and wellness. So within our division, and it is a really quirky name, Borough President Brewer, but climate and wellness, we look at that wellness as being holistic, including physical and mental wellness as a part of it. So thank you for that. And we continue to be champions for the kind of work that you're describing, Coral.
Okay.
If there's anything that we can do in our community board to support that, so that there's either open streets or more space, I know certainly ours would be incredibly enthusiastic to support that. We just don't know specifically what to recommend.
Okay. Coral, we can talk more just because of the time constraint. The other issue, though, is space in the school. That's one issue, because I know in the past that there's always been an issue. Sometimes you need some private space. Is that being worked out? Number one. Number two, you're a social worker. With all due respect to social workers and principals, social workers do not like to be supervised by a principal or a teacher because they don't know your profession. So how are you dealing with that? Maybe you can't say, but I can say that it's a problem. And I just didn't know if you're dealing with it in some way. It comes up all the time.
Absolutely, Borough President. And I listen carefully when you speak. And when we had this discussion before,
I know.
We took some measures this year in particular. So I'm also happy to share that for the first time at the borough level, we will have social workers and social work supervisors that can support our newly hired social workers and our social workers across the system, because we recognize that to be an area that we really need to focus on within our school system. Like, how do we really think about how we support this body of work, from the school to the borough-based supports, and then certainly we'll continue to be champions for this work at the central level. So
Okay.
each borough office will be hiring a supervisor for social workers, and they will serve as critical support system for our many school-based social workers that we're hiring. So we'll continue to build these systems out. They will not all happen overnight, but we are certainly taking steps in the right direction. And we thank you and appreciate you for certainly being a champion for this work as well.
That's great news. And the space, so every school will have to work out, but I do hear about that as an issue. So I guess you're gonna, somehow it has to work out.
Yeah, we're continuing to partner with our colleagues in facilities to really think through space. We have made, I can follow up, Carl, on the open streets inquiry. I would love to continue to have that discussion as well. So I'm happy to continue the conversation beyond this session.
Okay, and then finally, our friends at NASW, we love NASW. And they always say that one student for one social worker for every 250. And I don't know that that's possible. I just didn't know how close you might be getting to that with the wonderful hires. And of course, because I'm a pain in the neck, I called IBO to do a study. And they say you need another 75 social workers in order to be able to have the full amount to meet that criteria. So I don't know that you're able to do that, but I just want to know how close we're getting to the 1 to 250, and are like all of the, like you said, 80% of the 500 will be assigned.
They're already hired. Mm-hmm.
Yep, hired and assigned. And then the question will be, they'll have good supervision, and they will have a gazillion problems to deal with, So how close are we to the 250 to 1, or even in the ballpark of that? Because you have a lot of students.
So I will ask Flavia if she can pull that data up. We do have that available.
Okay.
We have made significant gains, especially with, what we're doing now and hiring the 500 social workers. This is really unprecedented for our school system, but we know that our young people in our school communities deserve this kind of support. But I'm happy to share where we are. I don't know, Flavia, if it includes the 500.
No, the data that we have doesn't currently include the 500, LaShawn, because we also need to match it against school enrollment, which we don't have. Final enrollment number. Yeah, well, we know that for 2020, 2021, the ratio of guidance counselors and social workers to students was 1 to 215, and the ratio of guidance counselors to students, so the combined ratio of both was, 1 to 215. So we will have to obviously redo the number with the hire, but also with enrollment. And I think is, to do a clean data number, I can
And that's with guidance counselors and social workers.
And social workers combined.
Yeah, we can disaggregate the data once we get the enrollment numbers and then share out more broadly. There's definitely more to do here. I will be the first to say that we have more to do here. But in the time I've been in this seat for about 3 years now, the time that we've been here, a new division, you can certainly feel our impact, and we're looking forward to doing more in this area in particular, because there's certainly more to do.
And congratulations. There are questions that we have in the chat, but we have to keep moving because we're going to run out of time. But I want to thank you very much, and we will, if it's okay with you, gather some of the chat questions and pass them along.
Send them over.
Okay.
We'd love to have them. Thank you so
very
much.
And congratulations. It's a big deal. And just so you know, at least in Manhattan, you know how I feel about those other boroughs, but at least in Manhattan, if there are, we're like the 311. So sometimes if we can help with some of the more intractable problems, please tell the borough social workers or whatever the supervision apparatus is, that we'd be glad to help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your partnership.
If they don't live in the neighborhood, they may not know, even as professional as they are, they may not know what the resources are, and there are so many. So
thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go over a little bit of time, everybody. We're going to have Margaret Crotty, who's Executive Director, Partnership with Children, and also, I think she might be also with us, Angela Jefferson, who's Vice President of Programs at Partnership with Children. I am a huge fan of this program. They are in 32 schools. They actually do discussion that we heard earlier from the DOE. They actually provide these mental health services for 30,000 students across the boroughs. And they are one of the biggest providers of community school services in the city. They have amazing reach. And I just, one story that they probably don't know, there's two of them. Number one, I don't know how many years ago, 5 years ago, I'm in a school, Lower East Side, don't remember the school. Partnership for Children had just come in. There were 5 kids who had a parent in jail. I have foster kids, parent in jail, kid acts out, happens immediately. It's not even, you don't even have to go anywhere for it to happen. And Partnership for Children came in, and I went back to the school a few months later, and those kids were already under care and supported and calming. So you need the social workers. So I want to thank Deputy Chancellor Robinson and her team, and I certainly want to thank Partnership with Children. So go ahead and please join us. And I'm sorry, we're going to run over a little bit, but this is a great program. Go right ahead, Margaret.
Thank you. And thank you always for all your support for our work. And we're so grateful to you and to to the whole DOE for really taking on the cause of social workers in schools. And it is an extraordinary achievement, what has happened. And I also so appreciate your advocacy on behalf of social workers who really need clinicians to report to, and that's something that we have felt strongly about. So as Gail said, we are, a leading school-based mental health provider, and we're the lead CBO in 12 community schools and another 7 as the subcontractor for mental health. So actually we know a lot about the food pantries and the fresh food pantries and the needs of food. And so would love to continue to connect on that. Our DNA though, since the early 1990s has been to have specially trained and very highly clinically supervised social workers full-time in school. So it's not like somebody says, come back on Thursday when the social worker is here. Our staff is really part of the school community. And our community school model has one non-negotiable, that the community school director has a peer, and that's a social work director who brings in our social work program. So I think when LaShawn was speaking, it could have been our pitch, all of the trauma that children and families are experiencing now. And we really think that children's mental health is not only one of the biggest problems now, but for a generation, it will be one of the biggest challenges that the city faces. So we're so grateful to have everybody's attention on this. I'm going to turn it over, and I would have talked for a while, but I'm going to turn it over to Angela, who oversees all of our programs. She's our vice president of programs and an extraordinary clinician and an extraordinary leader. But I will say, we are just grateful that there are social workers in schools. One thing I'd love to advocate for, and this might actually start to answer the question on how close we are to the NASW standard. Our social workers are not counted in those numbers. So we have specially trained, specially supervised social workers who don't get counted in the DOE numbers. And so we probably, with a couple of other CBOs, add another 250 to 300 social workers in schools. And I'm not sure how it works, but they're not counted in those numbers, and we'd love for them to be. We think there'd be a stronger allocation of resources. And again, we really do believe in that special supervision. So we have, every one of our supervisors has a clinical director who spends 1 day a week in that school. And because of our model, we're able to really respond to the emerging needs, and we think that's going to be most important this year. But I know we're out of time, but I want to give Angela just a few minutes to show you the work that we're doing.
You guys are wonderful. Go right ahead, Angela. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Borough President. I'm excited to talk to you all about social work in schools. You just heard a really amazing presentation by the DOE arm of this work, and I just want to sort of highlight the community-based program arm of this work, because it's DOE is an invaluable partner to us, and we're in schools, but we have been able to do some things that the DOE program has not been able to do because of their size and scope. And we have been able to provide clinical supervision to all of our staff since the beginning. That is something that we do. We value the training and support that's needed for our staff to be able to do this work.
And so like Margaret said, their supervisor comes on site to their school at least once a week, sometimes it's more. And they're not only providing that support to the clinical social worker that's in the building, they're also providing that support to school staff when necessary. So we are engaging in professional development opportunities for school teachers, paraprofessionals, anyone in the building around issues like trauma-informed practices. What does it mean? We understand that behavior is communication. Behavior of students is telling us something. And in being able to interpret and understand what that behavior is telling us is what is going to help our students kind of get their needs met and get the services and the resources that they need. We really are understanding that when we think about returning to school, we're thinking about the fact that students have gone through tremendous trauma, their families have, the school communities have as well. We all, just everybody in this room and everybody that you pass in the world these days is going through the same trauma. And understanding how to respond to those needs across the spectrum of people concerned is really another thing that's going to be really important. It is one thing to focus on an SEL tool for students, which is incredibly important. And you also need to understand that for every other person that's involved in the services that are in the education and mental health services and support that are being provided to students. And so that's what we have been focusing on this summer. We spend a lot of time over the summer training our social workers on what's to come, best practices, and looking at what does reentry look like? What does anxiety look like in a kindergarten student versus what does it look like in a high school student? We know that it doesn't look the same. We know that the response isn't going to be the same. And so really preparing our staff for the variation of what the behavior that we're going to see, what we understand, and then kind of paying attention to what we don't see, right? Because we know that students fall through the cracks. We know that the squeaky wheel gets the resource, but we're about not losing anyone and not letting students fall through the cracks. And so that ratio of social worker to student, my opinion would be 250 is too much. How can you keep your eye on 250 students scattered about a school building and really hone in to all of the needs that may exist? Because what's going to happen is that you are going to get the referrals first for the students that are making the most noise, right? And noise being their behaviors are obvious. Their decline in academic performance is obvious, but we know that there are students who perform extremely well academically who are still in need of support and services, and they're suffering internally, but they're also very compliant in a school setting. And so we need people to be able to understand that we need to pay attention to what we both see and what we don't see. And so that's some of the work that we do as a community-based organization. Our reach in schools is broad. Like I said, we're not just focusing on the student, we're focusing on all the stakeholders in the school building. I know that time is precious, and so I can go on and on.
Thank you. Thank you
but
guys
I'm
so
happy
much.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, there were
about what
some
we do.
questions, in the chat, and then I'll see if there's a broader one. First of all, thank you both very, very much. I can't tell you how great your program is. I will say that what Terry Wisdom Community Board 10 is asking is going to be a real one. We got the mask issue, we got the vaccination issue, and we got, I don't want to do either one. So, is that something that's going to fall on you as who's going to deal with all that? Now there's a lawsuit. So I don't know, how do you explain all that to everybody? Or is that going to be on you? Or how are you handling it even this summer? Go ahead. God.
I'll let Angela, she's on the ground. One of the things that we think is valuable about our model is we try not to be doing these administrative things. And that's why it's actually important that we have but yes, it does. Because we're trusted messengers in the school and we're trusted adults in the school and often seen as not part of the system. And so, yes, it often comes to us. And we, have worked very closely with the DOE, the Office of Community Schools, and the unions the entire time to ensure that our staff follows, the same safety and the children, but also to keep everybody safe. But Angela, you're probably seeing more
It's
Yeah.
more like, how do you deal with the emotion that goes with
Oh,
I
yeah.
am, I'm not, all that stuff. It's not,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
that's what I'm concerned about, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the summer gave us a nice preview of that. So we were involved in some of the summer rising sites. We had our social workers staffing some of those programs and supporting families coming in and those students in those programs. And that was a preview. And our standpoint is always going to be the stance of safety and protection of students and families. And that's the lens that we come at it with, and that's the conversation that we have with folks. And so we're always going to say, yes, the policy is the policy, and we have to abide by and adhere to the policy, but tell us, you know, what are your reasons for not wanting to mask? What is your reasons for not wanting to be vaccinated?
Right, exactly. all
What
of
are
that.
your, and so that's the kind of, you know, and LaShawn did mention relationships as key, and we leverage those relationships, whether it's this conversation around vaccination and masks, or a conversation around you know, getting services for a student externally outside of school, because we know that their needs are greater than what can be really responded to over the course of a school day.
Okay.
So yeah, it's all about leveraging relationships and accurate, timely information. So we are trying to stay on top of all the guidance that is coming out so that we can have those conversations
Yep.
with families, because it's confusing. Things changed, you know,
Yep.
hour by hour. And so, yeah.
Oh, this small things like Shelley Fine from Community Board 7 is asking about the issue of just the vision issue, which I think has been dealt with over the years. But is that something that would fall under yours? Obviously, somebody is not able to see, they don't say anything, of course, and then you have to figure out the vision screening and figuring out what else is necessary for that child. Does that come under you, or is that the guidance counselor, or is that something that the DOE deals with on their own? Just something like that, you know, those kinds
In
of
our
things.
community schools, it's very much us. And so, so in our community schools, we've got dental and vision. In our non-community schools, where we just put in our social work program, where we have our social work program, we would essentially be the ones that would often figure out that a child has a problem and then work with the school
Got it.
to find the right.
You have to understand that
resources.
everybody wants to be a community school. So, you know, that's, you know, everybody wants it. So everybody wants you to be their community school partner. And then I call DOE, no, Gail, we don't have enough money for that. So I can't, I try, I push, but
I
so
know.
congratulations on being such a good community school partner. It's very necessary. I did bring up with DOE about this NYCHA versus DOE. Is that something that you're aware of? Do you partner? Are you aware that there's this gap between the two? Principal over here, NYCHA over here, nobody talking. And these are cities, basically.
I mean, this has
Yeah.
been something that we've all, you go, Angela, yeah.
I was just going to say, again, with our community school, in our community schools, we have the staff to be able to build and leverage those relationships. So our community school directors, our family outreach coordinators, their whole job is to know and become a part of the community. We often try as hard as we can to hire for those positions for folks who are from the community, so they have those relationships already. And then because we're a CBO, we also have other programming that allows us to also leverage those relationships. We're currently a Project Hope provider. And so those crisis counselors are also available to build and leverage relationships in the community. And so they're tabling at NYCHA events. They're making sure that they're making those connections and relationships with the folks who know.
I think
what's
even
going
whether it's a
on.
community school or not, for God's sake, they too should walk across the street and, you know, because you're talking 5,000, 6,000 families across the street, and there is a city there. So anyway, something to,
Yeah.
I don't know why it's so hard. It's been very hard, but I am determined to get them to talk to each other. I think because we have time constraints, Shula, are there other questions that you would like to ask? I'm hoping that, you know, it's exciting about the social emotional landscape that is happening with this. And I think we all should take some credit. The pandemic has made it even more necessary, but for those of us like you who were screaming and yelling about social workers before the pandemic, I just want to make that clear. Thank goodness we were doing that. That's what I say, so that we were somewhat ready for this September. I just can't imagine all the questions that are going to come in. They came in, I went to a lot of summarizing, and they came in somewhat, but the wonderful freedom of the arts and fun was helped. And that's not necessarily going to be available, that kind of fun, all during the year. So you'll definitely, your services are going to be needed. I can't even imagine all the questions. Go ahead.
Sure. I just want to highlight one question from the chat and also add one of my own questions. Aisha had asked, are there awareness materials available for parents who don't understand the signs, Angela, that you had talked about earlier? And then also a question I wanted to add is, what is partnership doing to both attract, recruit, and retain social workers of color, including in CUNY and also private universities?
Yeah, so the first question, one of the things that we do regularly is parent workshops. And so we have multilingual staff. We try to make sure that we're providing any of the workshops we do or literature that we give out, that it's available in multiple languages. We certainly have internally capacity for Spanish, and then if we need other languages, we would do what we need to do to get translation services in that case. In terms of retention, recruiting and retention of social workers of color, that's something that we have been focused on. We have been focused on diversity, equity, inclusion for 5 years now, 5+ years now. And one of our first initiatives was looking at our staffing, our retention, and our recruitment practices. So really quickly, some of the things that we do, in our recruitment, we specifically go to schools of social work like Hunter, Lehman, that have high numbers of students of color in their social work programs. All of the positions that are posted, we don't make a hire until we have interviewed a candidate of color for each of those positions to make sure that we are not missing anyone. We have support around licensing and studying for licensing exams. So we know that money sometimes gets in the way, financial resources gets in the way of people even pursuing their license and or taking the test for their license. Getting your LMSW or LCSW, just the testing alone and prep for that can be $800 depending on your prep classes and the cost of the licensing exam itself. And so, I think, valuing that and offering some financial support for folks to do that, continuing education credits, is also something. So I think that we looked at why staff was leaving. We did a lot of exit interviews. We now have a DEI focused exit interview so that we can understand from an equity and diversity perspective why someone might be leaving the organization. This is something that we have put a lot of energy and effort into to understand what the recruitment needs to be, how do we retain folks, and then organizationally thinking about career path, because people won't stay if there's nowhere for them to go. And so retention and really thinking about that.
Okay,
I don't know if I missed anything, Margaret.
You did a great job. But anyway, I want to thank everybody because I know we're out of time, and I have to say this has been a fascinating discussion. Even if you don't have children in the school system, certainly you're interested in everybody getting the food that is appropriate, and we also want to support our upstate farmers. I have to say that without the support that we talked about from DOE and from partnership, I think having experienced young people who don't have support, it would be a lot worse. So there's nothing more important, I would say, in getting the academics. You can't do unless you're feeling strong mentally and socially. So congratulations. Thank you, everybody. And with the new governor, we'll see what happens. We're very excited and have a great week. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelley.
Okay.
Week.